Hi, somebody just joined that's labeled IBM. Can I have your full name, please? Let me just unmute you here.
Hi, I'm Christine Schneider.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The meeting will start in a second. Admit. Where did Darcy Monk? There we go. Hi, Bill, can I get your last name, please?
Yeah, it's Bill Schneider.
Okay, great. The meeting will start in a second.
Okay.
Martin Gitlin.
Joined the meeting.
Hi, everybody. I think we'll give it just a few more minutes, see if anybody else shows up, and we'll get started.
For all of the participants joining the meeting, I've shared on the screen the location of all of the files for this meeting, which include the ordinance and the public comment that was submitted. So you're welcome to download that to use during the meeting.
Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Call the meeting to order at 6:10 p.m. Okay, we're having a special meeting to continue the public hearing on ordinance number, what's the ordinance number?
345.
Ordinance number 345, an emergency ordinance concerning the short-term rental of residential structures.
Join the meeting.
Did everybody get the agenda? And do I hear from a member of the board a motion to accept the agenda?
What's up?
I second.
Okay,
Sarah.
Hello,
Hi, this is Lauren.
who is this?
Hi.
Hello,
Okay, is Lauren on 303-999? Somebody just joined in. I think we're still getting some people in. Could we hold off for just a second? Hi, who is 303-999-6010?
Lauren Robinson.
Lauren Robinson. Okay, thank you.
we got a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Just a minute.
There you go. I'm good.
There you go. All in favor of approving the agenda, raise your hands. Marty, can you hear me?
15.
Are you there, Marty?
Am I finally fucking unmuted because I've been muted for the last 15 minutes? And if you don't want me in the meeting, that's okay.
You're unmuted,
15
Marty.
Thank you, finally. Jesus. Who has nothing to do with this. So forgive me for offending Jesus or anyone who loves Jesus. Or not.
Thank you. I did not get who made the motion or the second.
Aye.
I believe Sasha made the motion.
Kathy is still muted.
Okay, I'm finally not muted anymore.
Okay.
I don't know.
Kathy made the motion and Sarah
No,
seconded.
Kathy was muted. She made no motions. I was not capable.
I mean, not Kathy. Sasha made the motion. Sarah seconded. Now, is everybody unmuted?
So
How do we know?
as a point of order, I'm going to leave all the Board of Trustees unmuted. It's it's a little too difficult bouncing around, and I will just please ask that you be on your best behavior. Sam is going to outline the meeting rules. Please don't speak unless you've been nodded to speak. So I think he's going to go through that now, but just to keep everything a little bit simpler, I'm going to leave all the trustees unmuted,
Thank you.
as well as
Right.
the town clerk.
Jesus.
Joe, do you have something to say?
Yes, I do. Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Stevie. I'm an attorney with Sullivan Green Stevie, if I haven't met or spoken with some of you. Our firm has been town attorney for a number of years. I've worked closely with Barbara Green in particular on various matters concerning the town. As the mayor indicated, this is a continuation of the public hearing from last week on proposed ordinance 345 concerning short-term rentals. There was a lengthy meeting last week, and we very much appreciate your interest, involvement, and participation. Current circumstances with the pandemic that we've all been dealing with for a while now present some challenges in terms of having meetings by Zoom, with some of you appearing by video and some participating by telephone. To help with some of these challenges, we thought it might be helpful to have a roadmap, so to speak, in terms of trying to facilitate the discussion tonight and the procedure for the meeting. So with that in mind, it's my understanding that the mayor will initially take everyone's name who would like to comment publicly tonight. He will then call on each person individually and give you each an opportunity to provide a public comment for up to 5 minutes. That will hopefully help with each person being recognized and acknowledged. Also minimize talking back and forth or talking over each other, which can be difficult in a Zoom conference to begin with, and also difficult in terms of taking accurate minutes of the meeting. So once the public comments are concluded, the mayor will then, as I understand it, review and summarize the written comments that have been received. The public hearing portion of the meeting will then be concluded. The board will then have the opportunity to present comments, again, up to 5 minutes. The board will also have the opportunity to ask any questions of any members of the public who have provided commentary. After each of the board members have been able to present a comment for up to 5 minutes, then the board can open up a discussion and the board members can each follow up on any questions that they might have for a particular board member. At that point in time, I think it's my understanding that the board would welcome the input from Rick Caldwell, who has been involved in preparing the draft ordinance. At that point in time, the board would then consider the options that are available after this public hearing. And I believe that there are 4 options that the board will have this evening. And the first option is that the board can accept the ordinance as it's drafted. The second option is that the board could make a minor revision to the draft ordinance, and then at that point direct Rick to revise the draft ordinance accordingly. If there are more extensive changes or modifications, then the board could direct Rick to prepare a revised draft, which takes into consideration and incorporates the comments from tonight's meeting. And there would then be a continuation at a date certain after Rick has had an opportunity to prepare the revised draft, when the board can then review that revised draft and take action accordingly. And the fourth option is that the board may decide not to adopt the ordinance at all. So I think those are the 4 options. And Sarah, I think at this point, if you have anything that you would like to add in terms of the procedure for the meeting, that would be great.
Thanks, Tay. Absolutely. So just briefly, when you start speaking, if you would first provide us with your full name before you comment. Please do your best to observe the time constraints that we have established so that we make sure to hear as evenly from everybody as we can. Sasha will warn you verbally when you've got a minute left and when you've got 30 seconds left and when your 5 minutes is up, at which point you will be muted. So don't be surprised by that. Sam, when he goes through the list of folks who have indicated that they want to speak and called on them, he will return to the full group again after those comments are received to see if anybody who did not suggest they wanted to comment would like to offer comment after hearing others speak. And again, those newer individuals will be subject to the same 5-minute guideline and reminders. We ask that you avoid using the chat function if you have had your 5-minute verbal time. We want to remain as fair and balanced as we can about the amount of time that each of you has to comment. So if you did speak for 5 minutes, please don't use the chat function. And if you spoke for less than 5 minutes, please don't overuse the chat function so that we can try to moderate and maintain the evenness and fairness of the 5-minute rule. I think that is all, Joe, that I had, Sam, that I had, and thank you.
And thank you, Sarah and Joe. And I want to thank the team that's here in Town Hall helping me pull this together. Sasha, Sarah, Tay. Hopefully we can make this go smoothly and get all the information we need to get. I'm gonna open the meeting here to public comment in just a minute. Please follow the rules that we've laid out, and we'll give everybody a fair chance to say their piece. Give me just a minute to get my list of commenters and we'll get started.
Okay, if everybody wants to pay attention, this is the order of the commenters. First is Austin, the first one is Austin Grisham. Second is Darcy Munn. Third is Christine Schneider. Fourth is Bill Schneider. Fifth is Jack Watson. Sixth is Stephen Fenberg. And then for number 7, we have Melissa Morris. Number 8, Chris Cohen. Number 9, Ann and Chuck Jadell. Number 10, Judy Caldwell. Number 11, Casey Day. Number 12, Bob. Oh, I didn't catch your last name, I'm sorry. Number 13, Lauren Robinson. Number 14, Chad and Janet. And number 15, Tay Graham. So the first person we have to recognize is Austin Grissom. If you want to control the mute, Sam.
Okay.
Thanks, Sam.
Yep, you're on.
Thanks, y'all. First, just want to say thanks for putting this together.
Austin, hold up just a second, if you would, please. Okay. Sasha's got to get the timer going here. Okay. You ready now?
Let her rip. Thanks. Yeah, first off, thanks so much for putting this together. I do want to voice my support in full for this whole process. I think it makes so much sense for us to be putting money back into the town and back in the community for rental. I really just have one, I guess, area of clarification that I want to ask, which is section 6C. And that reads, in the case of an initial application made on or before the initial application deadline, but not any initial application made thereafter, the applicant must also certify that the property for which the license is being sought was in fact used for short-term rentals during the prior 12-month period to an extent that would have required a license, ... So I want to ask for clarification on that, especially as a newer resident, having purchased my home in January, moved in February, and with a plan to rent my carriage house. Just want to ask for clarification on the limitation of that. And if it would limit me or eliminate me from this license, I would ask that that would be reviewed and updated to allow newer residents or residents who have not rented a property in 12 months to be able to rent their property. That is all I have to say.
Okay, we'll take everybody's comments into consideration at the end of this, and we may or may not change that part of it. Who's the next one on the list?
The next speaker is Darcy Munn. Oops, where'd she go?
Okay. Let me find you here.
Where'd she?
Can everyone hear me?
Oh, she's open. Darcy, you're open for.
Okay, so I wrote a letter. I'm gonna just read, or I wrote comments down, so I'm gonna read from that. I did send it to Tammy, the clerk, but I'm not sure if she received it. So she was going to forward it to all the board members, so perhaps you've all already read this, but if not, just in case. Okay. So the following are our comments and concerns regarding Ordinance 345. We have had a short-term rental in Silver Plume for around 10 years, and to the best of our knowledge are the only ones that have done so, who have done so on a regular basis. The short-term rental works well for our situation, as it does for many others in this area, because of the flexibility to host friends and family first, yet to have extra income to afford the higher cost of living associated with being in the mountains. To this end, we can offer perspective and insight specific to this proposed ordinance. I have several bullet points. The first is the reason we decided on short-term rental rather than long-term was to keep the property well-maintained and managed. A lived-in home is generally better cared for than one that sits empty. After every guest, we must clean, update, maintain, and prepare the house for the next guest. It's arguable that this maintains the rental property in far better condition than even a typical long-term residence. The second bullet point, the overwhelming majority of guests visiting our rental in Silver Plume have been couples looking for a quiet, relaxing getaway. We have never had an issue with noise, disrespect, or irresponsibility. We have never had a full calendar, rather about 50% during peak seasons. This is to say, from our hands-on perspective, the market is not saturated or overwhelmed in Silver Plume. That's not to say that this may not be the case in the future, but this certainly doesn't justify a rush to an emergency ordinance at this time. We manage our rentals as an LLC and as such have commercial short-term renters insurance. We've taken great care in trying to protect our renters, the town, and ourselves. In our opinion, this is an asset to the community. Possessing proper renters insurance makes Section 8D of the ordinance redundant. The standards necessary to maintain proper renters insurance cover and far surpass the proposed inspection standards of the ordinance. In addition, requiring an inspection be conducted each year by an inspector approved by the town or the town building inspector could pass liability onto the town. These are considerations that we feel need further discussion and investigation. The proposed yearly application fee should reflect the short-term rental income. The income can significantly change due to unforeseen circumstances, such as our current pandemic. And our last bullet point is, though we are in agreement that we do not necessarily want Silver Plume overrun with short-term rentals that would potentially detract from attracting longer-term residents, there is some benefit to offering short-term rentals. the aforementioned upkeep and maintenance of properties, some outside money supporting our businesses, such as museum, train, and coffee bar, the use of our park and facilities, the encouragement of an outdoor lifestyle, and the jobs created for property cleaners, managers, and maintenance workers. Number one thing is that this is not an emergency situation, in our opinion, and does not justify a rushed emergency ordinance to be passed without thorough and all-inclusive thought and discussion. There are simply not hordes of people flocking to Silver Plume, clogging our streets, or overwhelming our town at this time. There are also no houses listed for sale at this time. You know, I have some other things. I'm running out of time. I'm running short on time, but Silver Plume is not Georgetown, so we would ask that we focus more on Silver Plume as our community and not kind of just do what Georgetown is doing, because we have very specific things that are quite different than Georgetown. Basically, all of these things just mean that we feel that we need more time and more discussion and maybe a committee to make better decisions for our community. We were asked in the last meeting to consider the community when implementing mine and Evan's future plans and endeavors, which we will wholeheartedly do. We would ask that as a community, we address some of the current concerns and impediments to the maintenance and beautification of our town. There are issues in town that are more pertinent to the community right now than the few short-term rentals that are currently operating, two of which are ours. I believe there are 4 others right now, and that's it, 6. Beautifying and better maintaining the town and properties would go a long way to attract longer-term residents, if that is the desire of our community. Evan and I would be happy to be on a committee to continue the ordinance discussion and help fine-tune it to the needs of the community.
All right, thank you for that. And I want to let you know that we did receive your comments and they were distributed to the board, so they will be taken into consideration. Thank you much.
Okay, next on the list we have Christine Schneider. And if the mayor approves, Christine, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We own a property in Silver Plume and we rent a separate small cabin on Airbnb on our property. And we've done so for, I think, 2 years now. I am all for the town of Silver Plume. I'm all for this, you know, the licensing fee. We want to give back to the community and make sure that there's, you know, funds to do what the community needs to do. So I just wanted to state that from the beginning. Most of my comments are questions, so I'm sorry for that. But my first question is, what will the town do with the license fees it collects? And I did send some of these via email to Tammy this morning. So, and then how will home buyers know about this ordinance? Will you inform real estate companies, or will it be up to the owner to let the potential buyers know that we've got an Airbnb on our property? And then if we sell our property, does our license go with the property, or is it just with us as the owners? And that would free up a spot based on the way the ordinance is written now for a new person. So wasn't sure about that. Also wanted to know if we do rent, it sounds like we have to rent a certain number of days each year. And I don't know if that was to just apply for the license, or is that we have to have renters for a certain number of days every year, and when we reapply every year for the license, you know, is that checked? And then I guess the whole monitoring question I have, who's gonna make sure I have guests, who's gonna, you know, monitor all that? That wasn't clear on how this is all going to be managed once these licenses are in place. And then lastly, about the inspections each year, is that something that the town will provide an inspector and that one person will go around and inspect all of the Airbnbs, or is it up to me to find an inspector? The whole inspection question, how that's going to work is also on my mind. But again, I'm very much in favor of the regulation, and appreciate the other two people that commented previous to me. Thank you.
And thank you for your comments and your questions. I'll try and answer your questions at the end of the public comment. I do have the email that you sent this morning. So I'll try and answer those questions for you at that point.
The next commenter is Bill Schneider.
I'm good now on meeting, okay?
He is. He has to yourself as well.
Hi, my name is Bill Schneider. I am Chris Schneider's husband. She covered a lot of what the two of us wanted to know, a little bit more detail around some of the rules as part of the ordinance. I have two additional questions to ask. One is with regard to a caretaker that needs to be available 24 hours a day in case some type of issue arises with the renters. It stipulates that that person must be in Clear Creek County. My comment on that is, what makes it have to be in Clear Creek County? Could it be extended to a slightly larger radius around Silver Plume? And secondly, with regard to some type of sign being posted that's visible from the roadway, I'd like to know a little bit more about what the size of that sign should be. How should it be out and visible 24 hours a day? What's acceptable and not acceptable regarding that sign that is supposedly going to have to be posted for a certain period of time. I have no other comments. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody participating today.
Thank you for your comments. As far as the sign requirements, Rick, could you address that? And the reason that I'm answering your questions now is because I don't have yours written down to where I can go through the list here in a little bit. So the ones that I do have written down, I'll address at that time. The ones I don't have written down, between me and Rick, we'll try and clarify as much as we can. Rick, can you take that one?
Yeah, as written, the ordinance just requires that it be legible from a passing car and states a number of pieces of information that the notice must contain. It doesn't have a minimum size. You can confer with the town clerk on that sort of thing because we post notices of that sort for a number of other zoning related purposes in the town, and they all look to me like they end up being about the same size. Over and out.
All right, and your question about the caretaker or the person responsible, we'll take that under advisement when we have the board discussion, and I don't see any reason why it couldn't be changed to that. All we're interested in is somebody that they can respond if there's a problem. So we'll take that under advisement. Tay, who's next?
The next speaker is Jack Watson. And okay, Jack, if you unmute yourself, you should be available to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I haven't had a chance to read the ordinance yet, so no comment from me.
Okay. So the next commenter is Stephen Fenberg. Oops. I'll unmute you. So if you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak now.
Great. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks everybody for doing this and kind of facilitating not only public comment on the issue in general, but for doing this and allowing folks to participate even in these crazy times with the pandemic. So my name's Steve Fenberg. I think I know several of you, but I am one of the owners of the Bread Bar, and we about a little over a year ago, I believe, we bought Al and Judy Stiggy's place over on Silver Street behind the KP, and we've kind of been living in it occasionally, remodeling it for way too long now. And the idea, the reason why we got the place is we've always wanted a place in town. And we want it for ourselves, for the owners, for our families to be able to use regularly. And also we want to use it for things connected to the bar. So occasionally we'll do a wedding, and there isn't enough space in town as it is, with the Windsor and with the Airbnbs that do exist. So we want to be able to sort of use it in one way or another as an extension of the bar for small events that we'll do in the future, like weddings or engagement parties. We intend to use it as an Airbnb at times in that context, but generally we will be using it ourselves, either the owners or family of the owners. We talked about it the other day when we first found out about this proposed ordinance, and we're actually okay with most of what's in it. We think it makes sense to regulate short-term rentals. A lot of communities are doing that these days, and we're comfortable with most of what is in there. I think we have a lot of questions similar to what other folks have raised, but we're not against Silver Plume regulating short-term rentals, and we think this is a pretty smart approach. Rick, don't let that go to your head though, that I said it was a smart ordinance now that I know that you wrote it. So we support it. We think, paying a fee and having that go into the town and supporting different aspects of the town makes a lot of sense. We do have a question related to, I think, the first question that was raised by Austin about so currently we've been remodeling the house for like a year while we live in it. We're obviously not trying to flip it and just make it a full-time short-term rental, or we would have finished our remodeling project a long time ago. But we do have a question around the timing. We have some events in the distant future booked through the bar that people were going to use the house for, but it technically hasn't occurred yet. So we have some questions around the timeline, and if it hasn't been used as a short-term rental because we're still working on the place, if we would still be eligible to apply and hopefully get a short-term rental license. So we have some questions around the logistics like that, but just wanted to say, we wanted to chime in and say we support the town taking ownership of some of these things happening. And we just, want to make sure it's done well and done in a way that there aren't unintended consequences. But we're happy to talk more, whether it's, as part of the discussion or something, or in the future, in a way that we can be constructive with the town and helping, get these regulations enforced and hopefully be a good steward of our property and a constructive member of the community. So thanks, and happy to chat with folks individually as well separately.
Okay, thank you. As far as the question about if you'd be allowed to do that because you haven't done it before, that'll be something that we'll discuss when the board has their discussion. As the ordinance is written right now, you wouldn't be able to, but I suspect that's one of the things that is going to be up for discussion because everybody seems pretty concerned about that. Okay.
The next speaker, if she wishes to use her time, is Melissa Morris. And Melissa, you might have to unmute yourself as well.
Okay.
There you go. And then unmute.
Hello. Well, we got Melissa and Mark Morris here. And I grew up in Clear Creek County, but just recently moved to Silver Plume up the road a little ways here. And I just had like 6 little bullet points I was going to discuss about this. And the first bullet point is, after reviewing the ordinance numerous times and kind of reflecting on the comments and concerns addressed from the last meeting, we kind of overwhelmingly feel that this is in no way an emergency. There are like 6 properties currently being used as short-term rentals. And this is not a number that is like significantly affecting the town of Silver Plume, in my opinion. And as it's not an emergency, in my view, I think it's recommended that the committee outside the town council be formed to better address this issue. This committee would be afforded the time to reflect the balanced opinion of the people of Silver Plume. And number 2, the current ordinance states that the only properties who would be able to apply for these licenses as it stands are those who have demonstrated 12 months of short-term rental prior to applying for the license. And this is super restrictive for anyone like myself that may want their properties for short-term rentals in the future. Additionally, we recommend that there be a separate license for people who are full-time residents who wish to rent out any or part of their homes as a short-term rental, perhaps something similar to Crested Butte. We talked about that last meeting. Number 3, the suggested ordinance that be adopted concerns, most of the regards were because of public health, safety, and welfare. But if that was truly the driving motivation, other more readily obvious health and safety concerns throughout the whole town could be addressed immediately. I mean, like tomorrow. Number 4, the administrative penalties are excessive. And number 5, during the current pandemic, the economic downturn, we believe, with this economic downturn, we believe that it's cruel and kind of out of touch of Silver Plume to limit potential economic opportunities for the citizens here in Plume who may otherwise be losing their jobs, their housing. In short-term rentals, if those aren't an option, some people may find it harder to have a well-being of life. And my last point is number 6. Overall, we feel that this doesn't in any way constitute an emergency. And given the current economic conditions, we feel that this ordinance should be put on hold until we can come up with the total agreements, and we shouldn't just rush to be passing this ordinance by the Plume board. Thank you.
All right, and thank you. We'll take all that into consideration. Tay, who's next?
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself. The next speaker, she wishes to use her time, is Chris Cohen, or his time.
Is that me?
Yep, that's you. You just popped on. Perfect, Chris.
Hey, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Well, this is Chris and Lisa Cowan here. We own the Pink House by the park. And we read over the ordinance, and I think one of the major points that we'd like to make sure to address that hasn't been really kind of said so far is just the limiting of the participants at the beginning of this to 6 really restricts everything completely. So
yeah, we've seen this in Georgetown. Chris's family has a long history in Silver Plume in Georgetown, and we ourselves have lived in Plume for the last 7 years, and also in Georgetown for part of the time before that. So we have been trying for most of that time to rent out a family house in Georgetown, And we, Chris's dad built that house, and the house has been in our family since like 1978, and we're unable to do a short-term rental with that house. And I guess what I'm trying to say is Georgetown has created zones. The zones have limited numbers of short-term rentals available. And with that, it's created hoarding of those licenses. So I understand that there's penalties suggested with this license, that if people are not using the license, there would be penalties. However, I think it would be very difficult to enforce that, and it would create a situation where people hoard them, they never turn over, and people who would be good candidates are not allowed to be considered. And then it also creates political issues where large builders can come in and get grandfathered into the system, and your positive homeowners, people who have been in the community, are good members of the community, don't have the ability to come into that system ever.
Yeah, and it creates questions that, you know, ask about when you sell your house, you know, does that license go with it or not? And I think, you know, if it creates those type of questions, then that is just the wrong thing to be saying. So, anything else?
I think just as it's currently written, I think that it'll create a hoarding problem with the licenses, and I think it'll severely limit, just like Mark said, you know, the current residents of Plume or any future positive residents, and being able to have enough income to afford the homes and create income opportunities so that we can continue to live here.
I think that's it. Thanks, guys.
Okay, to answer your question about if the license will go with the property, the way that the ordinance is written right now, in section 6, item G, it says a short-term rental license is issued to the owner of the property when the short-term rental, where the short-term rental will occur, may only be used for that property and is not transferable upon the sale of that property. So in other words, no, the license will not go with the property if it's accepted as written. Tay, who's next?
Next on the list are Ann and Chuck Jadell, if they choose to speak. You'll have to unmute yourself, Chuck.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. No problem.
Chuck and Ann have no comment towards the ordinance. We were just tuning in to see the actions and comments of others tonight.
Okay, thank you. Then next we have Judy Caldwell, if she wishes to speak.
And I'm similar. I came to listen and learn. I don't have any comments.
Okay.
Right now. Thank you.
Then next we have Casey Day, if he chooses to speak.
I choose to speak.
Okay, you're live, Casey.
All right, I got video.
Yep.
Perfect. I can see you. Well, this is my first town board meeting in a while, and for those of you that don't know me, I live in town, kind of near the bread bar, and I don't have a VRBO or an Airbnb, but you know, it's something down the road that I could consider. And I was just mostly tuning in to hear your guys' comments. Definitely support Austin and some of the other comments where, you know, people new to town just want to know if that's something going forward. Like Steve Fenberg was wondering if you don't have a rental history over the last 12 months of, you know, VRBO or Airbnb, if that's something you can apply for and go forward. I think I support there being regulations in town, but also agree with Darcy that and Mark Morris that it doesn't seem like this is any sort of emergency. There's very few people in town right now, and there's very few VRBOs, so it doesn't seem like it's the primary issue. It seems like there's a lot of other issues that, you know, might be a little bit more important that we should be focused on. But definitely want to offer my support and I will read through the ordinance and let you guys know if I come up with anything. But yeah, that's all. Won't waste any more of your time. Thanks for letting me check in with you. Good to see everybody.
All right, thank you much.
I think we lost a person, but so the next person on the list, if she wishes to speak, is Lauren Robinson.
Hi, hi. Thanks everyone for being here. So I sit on the fence. I understand where you need the money, but at the same time, I feel like there's no rush, and I'm all over the place. I think it creates too much stress in our community to have this ordinance. There's too many rules to follow. Part of the reason why I moved up here was the freedom to live and let live. So I don't believe that this ordinance is going to really provide that for Silver Plume anymore, and it's going to kind of be destructive for our town to some extent. My guests that come to the hotel absolutely adore what Silver Plume is currently in its state, and they just feel that it's a magical place. And I feel that everybody coming in new that is trying to change it and just profit off of Silver Plume doesn't have their right place and heart for this town. I currently have a long-term renter in 420 house, and I've also had it short-term. I would like to have the ability to let it be my choice without worrying of inspectors and permits and this, that, and the other. I enjoy having the long-term renter. It takes a lot of work off of my shoulders, but at the same time, you know, whenever it does come to this and that, I would like to have the choice to just short-term rental it if I desire to. I'm not looking out to make a dollar. I think there's better ways to create money into this town, like the ice cream social, than to put more laws and stipulations on us, which just creates a division. I feel like if we come together as a community, that we're going to be better off than if we try to divide and conquer. I think we should come together. And then my question is, I was asking along the way if the zoning in the town has been changed, and I would really like to have complete clarification that I'm still commercial zoned, because that's the next hurdle I would have to jump through as well.
Yes.
And
Commercial.
I am.
Yes.
And then I'm already paying my taxes and my dues by having a commercial business. So, I don't see how much more stress I would like to add to my plate by adding this ordinance. I'm already under a whole lot, being a mother of 4 boys and, seeing everything that comes and goes in this town as it is. So I feel like we should work together and come up with a better plan than this ordinance. But that's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Who's next?
Next on the list are Chad and Janet, if they choose to speak. You'll have to unmute yourselves though, Chad and Janet. Are you still there?
Oh yeah, we're here. Good evening. How's everybody doing? Good. Oh, sorry. We haven't really had a chance to read the ordinance, but we're definitely in favor of the town being able to, to prosper a little bit from the Airbnb. We originally had the 2 houses up above the train station. We bought those, I think, in 2014. We started Airbnb the first one out, I think, in 2017. And one of the things with the Airbnb is it does let people to see the Silver Plume, right? That's one of the reasons that we bought that, because we kind of fell in love with the town and the history and stuff. So and it also lets us be able to afford to have the place, with a short-term rental. We can use it as much as we want, and then still that helps us pay for it. But I definitely think if it's beneficial for the town to have regulations on it, I think it's great. So that's pretty much the only thing we've got. Like I said, I haven't really dug into the whole ordinance yet. That's all we got.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next and last on the list, unless Jack Watson, so there were Jack Watson and Chuck Jadell and Judy Caldwell and chose not to speak. And I don't know if any of those would like to make a comment now. I'm guessing no. And then the last public comment is from Tay Graham.
Okay, go ahead, Tay.
Okay, hold on. I have to rearrange my screen for a second so I can see her timer. Hold on one second. Oh. Okay. So I'm Tay Graham. I live at 1050 Madison. I moved to Silver Plume a couple of years ago. And one of the things that I'm really concerned about is there's no real prioritization of residents and owner occupied housing. And I liked the idea what the Morrisons, I think it's the Morrisons, brought up of having a committee because to kind of define some of these things, because I know there's questions about what is owner occupied, what is permanent residence, and the different timelines specified. I think this is a good start, but my feeling on this is we should really welcome some kind of work session or committee setup, because this is something that's really going to impact the town moving forward. And I don't think it's an emergency, aside from potentially stemming, COVID. If we had short-term rentals running wild, we would have to shut them down just like every other county did. But I don't think that's what's happening. And I think what I notice is the ordinance doesn't really take into account the preventability of issues. Instead, it kind of goes into penalization. And to that, I don't believe that we have a structure set up to enforce any of these things. So we're setting the bar way too high for Silver Plume. And what I would like to see, and what I'm hearing from my fellow residents, is something more comprehensive and scaled down to kind of match our town, a basic checklist. Like one of my recommendations, what I would like to see added, partially because I'm the public works person, is that every residence that's has a short-term renter ever should be required to have a bear-proof container, because I end up picking up bear garbage from renters all winter long. So, like just little things like that, the checklists that make things safe and relieve the strain on our community resources. So that being said, we have a fee set up, and the short-term rentals are going to be residential. But in this town, we have a couple of commercial entities. They already pay, specific taxes, bed taxes, and significantly higher water rates. And I don't know if that's going to be addressed. If going down the road, allowing people to operate some kind of commercial entity in their home, are we going to give some relief to the people who've been paying these really high fees, all along? I think the bottom line is, I don't think that this is a final draft, and I don't accept it how it is, and I don't support any board member's opinion that this is the final draft. And I would persuade you to please look further into the community and have a longer discussion. I understand in Silver Plume we have a long history of things dragging on forever and not getting done, but this really kicked us in the pants and put together a lot of framework. And I think if we keep on this structured path, we could take the public and really create something more cohesive, that people aren't really coming to this meeting scared and terrified that like these opportunities are going to be taken away from them. Or, some of the regulation is pretty steep, and I don't know who's going to be doing the enforcing, but I just have this idea in my mind that if we have this resolution that is so steep, we have no teeth to really do anything about the problems that it might create. And in that vein, we've eliminated the possibility for some people that, like somebody said earlier, would be good short-term renters. So I would implore my board to please vote to have more insight into this resolution, possibly a work session. And I really like the idea of having a committee of people outside of the community. And I think what is really key to this, something that I didn't really see, is the notification to the residents was pretty sparse. I think we really need to make sure like we reach out and let everybody know, because this affects everybody's house in Silver Plume, use their private property. And I think this warrants even door knocking, 2 months of warnings, you know, and allow people to have the kind of input that they should, because like this is a very impactful on how we get to use our private property. And like Lauren said, I came up to Silver Plume to kind of live and let live. So that's all I have to say. Thank you. I'll mute myself.
All right, thank you, Tay.
That's the end of the list. If anybody else, you can recognize anybody else who might have anything to say, but that's the end of the public comment.
Okay, is there anybody else from the public that hasn't spoke yet that would like to? I can't see the full screen. Tay, is there any hands raised? There we go.
Yeah.
Say video. Start video.
Still all dirty. I have a question. Oh, sorry.
All right. I don't want to get into a whole bunch of back and forth here, but okay. Sorry about that. I forgot about being muted. I don't want to get into a whole bunch of back and forth here, but I do see a couple of hands. If you've got a quick question or a quick comment, that's fine. I want to move this ahead. So, Christine, I seen you have your hand up. You go ahead. You got.
Can I just interject? Edmund had his hand up and he did not speak for 5 minutes. Darcy did. So I don't know if you want to allow him to participate in the public comment. And then Christine had a.
Okay, Christine, go ahead.
I just had a question. Is it legal to limit the number of Airbnbs? That's my question. Is it legal to be able to limit the number of Airbnbs? That's all.
We've run this past our town attorney. Joe, would you like to comment to that?
Can't hear.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the town can consider a limitation on Airbnbs. I mean, to answer your question, that can be considered.
Okay. Go ahead, Munz.
Edmund, you're unmuted, so I don't know. Sasha,
can I speak? Is that cool?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just wanted to comment quick on just the normality of life these days is not very normal, and there's a lot of special circumstances. And you know, I've been a traveling worker for the last 10 years, spending most of the months not here in the summer, and most of all winter I'm here. And you know, the definition of resident and owner occupied is very different these days than what it might have been maybe 20 years ago. A lot of jobs are flexible. People are working from home. This pandemic thing is going on. I think limiting people's options to, you know, have income from different ways is really hurtful right now. I just think that there's some brakes need to be checked, and we need to take our time and figure out really what we want to do with the people in this town to have options. You know, we want to bring businesses to town. We want to thrive as a community. And to me, this seems like a step backwards. And I just think I would like to make sure that we're heard on taking our time and making this ordinance something that can benefit everybody and that we can all agree on.
Okay.
You know, it's also something about having family members involved, you know, like the bread bar was saying, having our family be able to come out at any given time and to be able to have housing for them, and having the flexibility of a short-term rental versus a long-term is pretty much almost necessary for our type of lifestyle. We don't even know when we're going to be in town because my work changes. And so there's no real set schedule for a family like mine. You know, I chose Silver Plume to raise our family here, but that doesn't mean that I can't seek opportunities other places. And to start saying who's a resident and who's not, and who is beneficial in this town and who's not, to me seems very discriminatory. And I work full time in Silver Plume area. I work at Loveland, and other times I'm working on the road. And so I just think there's a lot of questions to be asked when you start defining who's who in this town. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Has everybody from the public had a chance to speak? Is there anybody else who wants to? Okay. Then at this time, I'll go through the written comments that we have. I think some of them's already been addressed by the people that wrote them. But I'll skim through them here real quick. As soon as I find the right paper. Okay, the first one that I have here, written comment, is from Kathy. Since you haven't had a chance to speak yet, Kathy, I'll let you present your comments when it's your turn. Rick, I have comments here from you. I'll let you address them when it's your turn. Let's see. Okay, this comment's from Sarah and Wilson Franklin. Are they on? They're not on here today, are they? Okay. Says we can understand the difficulties that might occur with homes that are full-time short rentals. The owner should be responsible. We're aware this doesn't always hold true. To operate a short-term facility involves a lot of time and hard work. We have a difficult time with selective governing. We are all for trash and garbage being handled properly, but how can you require this of short-term renters and not full-time residents? The idea of home inspections and insurance is always the property owner's responsibility and choice. Since when did the government get involved? There are personal property rights. Airbnb insures the property for their members. They also collect the taxes. They have many requirements. Have you researched VRBO and Airbnb? VRBO doesn't collect taxes last time I checked. The fee of $250 is fine. Does it have a designated purpose? It seems you have a lot of other ordinances not enforced. How can we take this one seriously? That's the end of their comment. The next comment I have here is from Tay. Tay, did you cover everything you wanted covered, or do I need to go over yours?
I just submitted it so it would be in writing as well, so you guys could read it beforehand, so it's fine.
Okay. Evan and Darcy, did you cover yours, or do you want me to go over your comments? Evan, Darcy?
Yes, would you, I wasn't able to cover all of it, so yes, we would be happy if you could read it again, please.
Okay. You mind if I just skim through it and read what you didn't cover already?
I skipped over several parts, so if you could reread it all, that would be great. Thank you.
All right. We've had a short-term rental in Silver Plume for around 10 years. And to the best of our knowledge, we are the only ones that have done so on a regular basis. Short-term rental works well for our situation. It does for many others in this area because of the flexibility to host friends and family first, yet to have extra income to afford the higher cost of living associated with being in the mountains. To this end, we can offer perspective and insight specific to this proposed ordinance. The reason we decided on short-term rental rather than long-term was to keep the property well maintained and managed. A lived-in home is generally better cared for than one that sits empty. After every guest, we must clean, update, maintain, and prepare the house for the next guest. It's arguable that this maintains the rental property in far better condition than even a typical long-term resident. The overwhelming majority of guests visiting our rental in Silver Plume have been couples looking for quiet, relaxing getaway. We have never had an issue with noise, disrespect, or irresponsibility. We've never had a full calendar, rather about 50% during peak seasons. This is to say, from our hands-on perspective, the market isn't saturated or overwhelmed in Silver Plume. That's not to say that it won't be the case at some point in the future, but this certainly doesn't justify a rush to an emergency ordinance. We manage our rentals as an LLC and as such have commercial short-term renters insurance. We've taken great care in trying to protect our renters, the town, and ourselves. In our opinion, this is an asset to the community. Proper renters insurance makes Section 8 of the ordinance redundant. The standards necessary to maintain proper renters insurance cover and far surpass the proposed inspection standards of the ordinance. In addition, requiring an inspection be conducted each year by an inspector approved by the town or the town building inspector could pass liability onto the town. These are considerations that should be further discussed and investigated. I'm going to pause right there for just a second and ask Jo her opinion on that requirement passing liability onto the town. Jo? Jo, are you still on?
I don't see her at the screen. She might have stepped away for a minute.
Okay. I guess we'll ask the question in a little bit. The proposed yearly application fee should reflect the short-term rental income. The income can significantly change due to unforeseen circumstances, such as the current pandemic. Though we are in agreement that we do not necessarily want Silver Plume overrun with short-term rentals that would potentially detract from attracting longer-term residents, there is some benefit to offering short-term. The aforementioned upkeep and maintenance of properties, some outside money supporting our businesses such as a museum, train, and coffee bar, the use of our park and facilities, the encouragement of an outdoor lifestyle, and the jobs created for property cleaners, managers, and maintenance workers. The number one thing is that this is not an emergency situation and does not justify a rushed emergency ordinance to be passed without thorough and all-inclusive thought and discussion. There simply are no hordes of people flocking to Silver Plume, clogging our streets, or overwhelming our town. There are no houses listed for sale at this time. Upon doing a search of currently listed short-term rentals in Silver Plume, I was able to find the following between several websites. The actual addresses are, to the best of my knowledge, based on personal cross-reference research and may not be accurate. She lists seven properties, 255 Main Street and 265 Main Street are theirs. 450 Garfield Street, Tiny Mountain Cabin behind the main house. 425 Hancock Street, the Cricket on the Creek. 120 Main Street, Alpine Retreat, hosted by Sarah and Wilson. 340 Charles Street, Miners Ridge Vacation Chalet, hosted by Janet. The Windsor Hotel. She says the Windsor advertises on short-term rental websites. Zoning is, I assume, different. To the best of my knowledge, none of these other current renters were in attendance at last Monday's meeting, nor were other property owners who may not have current listings but have in the recent past or would like to in the future. It doesn't seem fair to move forward without at least an acknowledgement from these owners. Silver Plume is not Georgetown. We should make decisions that are best for our community, not decisions that are based on what Georgetown is doing or has done. We can look to other communities like Georgetown for guidance, but we need to make decisions that are based on our community size, demographic desires, and values. The nature of the town and its residents is unique and unlike many other places. Many people are part-time, whether they are technically residents or not. When we moved to town, we were told about half the property owners were here part-time. That's a large portion of the community. Many people travel for work or take time to travel because of seasonal jobs. We're not going to change the nature of our town. And by imposing restrictions, we're limiting the options available to everyone's unique lifestyle and livelihood choices. We were asked in the last meeting to consider the community when implementing our future plans and endeavors, which we will wholeheartedly do. We would like to ask, we would ask that as a community, we address some of the current concerns and impediments to the maintenance and beautification of our town. There are issues in town that are more pertinent to the community right now than the few short-term rental properties currently operating. Beautifying and better maintaining the town and properties would go a long way to attract long-term residents, if that is the desire of the community. Evan and or I would be happy to be on a committee to continue the ordinance discussion and help fine tune it to the needs of the community. That's the last written comment that I have. So at this time, I'll end the public hearing part of the meeting. I think we'll take a little break here so I can get up and stretch and get something to drink or whatever. Sasha, if you could set the timer for 5 minutes, we'll come back in 5 minutes and get into the board meeting part.
Is Kathy's comment a public comment, or is she commenting as a board member?
I'm not hearing anybody's.
I don't know if you might want to clarify that before. I'm not sure, like, because we're gonna read the ones.
I'm sorry, I'm having computer problems again. Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll come back.
It was if Kathy's comment, she submitted it under public comment as opposed to a board comment. Oh, it wasn't on the public, it was public because of. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Kathy. Okay, Kathy, you had a comment about the comments that you sent in. You're a member of the board, and that will be addressed during the board meeting. Okay. Can you put a 5-minute? Okay. I have an extra time. Can everybody hear me now? Okay, we'll get started here in just a minute. I moved my computer so I could hook up to the internet direct instead of through Wi-Fi, so maybe you'll be able to hear me a little better. Give me just a minute. I need to go get all my paperwork. I'll be right back. Okay, I think I'm ready to go here. I'm going to start out by providing my comments and kind of my overview of what I've heard so far before we start with the board members.
Sam, could I interject for just one moment before you start?
Yes, go ahead.
To clarify, because
Yes.
Christine had a question that I think may be helpful to clarify a little bit as far as the Airbnb is concerned, just so everyone is clear about that. Airbnb is essentially a site a service that someone can use to, rent a home or vacation property, what have you. It would be, to give you a comparison, it would be if you were going to rent a property and you used a leasing agent, and you have to pay a fee to that leasing agent. So in this instance, someone can use Airbnb to rent a vacation property or what have you. But in doing so, if there is an ordinance in place that restricts the ability to rent that property for whatever reason, whatever restriction is in place, then that ordinance would prevail. In other words, an Airbnb doesn't affect that. That's just a service that someone can use. If they use that service, they're still subject to whatever ordinance there might be in place. So I did want to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'll start out by just saying Rick Caldwell and myself, with some input from Sarah and a lot of input from the town's attorneys, Joe and Barbara, put this together. My reasoning behind it is I don't want to see our town turn into one big motel where every property here is a short-term rental. We're already short on volunteers, full-time residents that can be board members or the mayor or help out with the museum. All these short-term rentals, yeah, they may bring a little income and contribute money to the town, but as far as volunteers and that type of support for the town, they don't provide that. It's been brought to my attention some places in town that have been rented out as short-term rentals that aren't fit for human habitation. That's a lot of the reason for the inspections and to make sure that there's smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors and such like that, make sure that they're safe for people to stay in. I feel strongly that this is something that our town needs. I'm not trying, I have had no intentions in putting this together to take anything away from anybody. I just don't want to see these short-term rentals take anything away from the town. From the comments that I've heard so far, there's a lot of concern about people not having the opportunity to do this. And I would support taking the requirement out for people to have been doing it before to be able to apply during the initial application time. Open it up to everybody that wants to apply during the initial application period. I think that would help with that concern and open the opportunity to everybody fairly. I would support, in addition to it, to put a clause in it that if somebody's situation changes, they need to be able to do this to make ends meet or to pay their mortgage or whatever, and there's no licenses available, that they could petition the board for an exception, and the board could consider that based on a case-by-case basis based on the situation. I don't support anything that is gonna create a bunch of loopholes that people can use to be able to do it against the rules. I don't think that there should be a designation between a resident or a non-resident, for the main reason that that opens up a loophole. It's, as we've already discussed, it's hard to define what a full-time resident is, a part-time resident, primary residence. I think that just muddies the waters. I think if it's open for everybody to apply for at the start, and given a clause in there allowing for them to petition the board to consider extenuating circumstances, I think that makes it fair for everybody. We have a clause in there saying that the license will not transfer when you sell property. That as someone sells a property, we'll open a license for somebody who's on the waiting list, if there's people on the waiting list. Other than that, I think it's pretty good the way it's written. That's just my opinion. It'll be up to the board whether they agree with my opinion or not. I want everybody to know that I initiated this with what I believe is Silver Plume's best interest in mind, and I'll accept whatever the board decides, but that's my opinion. We'll move on now to Rick, and he can give us his opinion of what's been said so far and where he thinks we should go. Rick, it's all yours.
Yeah. At the beginning, Joe outlined 4 options for where we end
Sam,
up.
sorry, Rick, I don't mean to interrupt, but we're having connection issues here. Sorry.
with me? Am I?
No, I think it's because we're all using it. This happens here at this office, so I don't know if we should. I tried to reduce. I removed everybody's video, but maybe we could turn the video off on anybody who's not speaking. That might help.
Okay.
Let's see. I mean, I'm frozen right now too. So
Give us just a minute here to resolve some technical difficulties.
Tay, are we ready to go?
I think yes. I've turned off video for anybody who's not speaking, so that should help. But let me make sure we have all the board members on here. Chris says, Sarah. Okay, just 1 second, please. Can we get a roll call for, so do we still, here, let me unmute everybody, hang on. So do we still have Frank?
Yeah.
On the Marty? Marty, are you still there?
Yes. Yes, and I'd like to say I've been
So
muted and unmuted
Marty's
now
absent.
20 times.
Do we still have Sasha?
No, I am not fucking absent.
Sasha, I believe, is moving.
Holy shit.
I think we're having a Silver Plume internet moment.
Excuse me for laughing.
Is it okay if I say something? It's Lauren.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say about the volunteer thing. I haven't been involved in any of the board meetings because I've just never been notified, and no one's ever knocked on my door and asked me if I could be part of the community. And so I just feel a little left out in that process, and I feel that it's a little unjustified to say that you're low on volunteers when you've never really knocked door to door to seek it. And so I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you.
Do you want to try to do a roll call again, Sam, and see if everybody's here?
Okay. Okay. Marty? Marty, are you here?
Everybody is unmuted that has not muted themselves.
Chris?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Frank?
Here.
Sarah?
Here.
Sasha?
Here.
Kathy?
Here.
Is that everybody?
Everybody but Mark.
I
There
am
he is.
here.
Okay.
God, 20
All right, that's
times
everybody.
I've been muted and unmuted. Let's get this together finally.
Marty, you and everybody else have been muted and unmuted. So
It took
don't
me
get a chip
15
on your
minutes to
shoulder.
get on the meeting. We need to, and I don't. We'll talk about this at another
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I understand that. It's just, I apologize. It's just exceedingly frustrating, and I apologize, but
Trust me, these Zoom meetings are very frustrating for me too. It's a learning experience for most of us. I'm trying. We're all trying. Have patience. Rick, the floor is yours.
Okay. At the beginning, Joe outlined 4 possible outcomes for this meeting. approve the ordinance as is. I don't think that's in the cards at all. Approve it with minor changes. I really don't think that we're there either. As the author of this, or the primary author of this ordinance, I think it needs some major changes. And so I'm going to recommend option 3. And I'm going to recommend that we put together a committee of people, a small working committee with representatives of the various classes of people here to work on this. I've heard from a number of people that this shouldn't be an emergency. I think we could do it without making it an emergency. I think that the problem, or that there are all kinds of problems with the past use requirement as a qualification for applying now, that should go by the wayside. I'm concerned that a number of people raised the enforcement issue. Enforcement is always a problem in this town. It always will be. It will be for this ordinance. But if you say we can't enforce it, let's not enact it at all, then why do we have any laws? We've done our best with enforcement. We have steep penalties. We've said we can claim a lien against somebody's property. I'm not sure that we can go much further than that. And we're going to have to rely on people's goodwill and people's and the alertness of neighbors. If nobody's complaining, we're not going to know about most of the violations. We may not know about any of them. But then again, nobody's complaining. If they're complaining, we'll look into it. So I suggest that we spend some time putting together a working committee that would involve 1 or 2 primary owners of a primary residence, owners of an owner-occupied residence. That's somebody who wants to be able to rent it out for part of the year, but stay in it themselves part of the year. And somebody who's buying this simply as an investment or has a property simply for investment purposes. Because I see those as the 3 categories that are probably going to justify somewhat different treatment under whether a license is required, what it costs, and whether they're subject to a cap or not. So once again, let's try to put together a committee to really rework this thing from scratch. Thank you. Over and out.
All right, now we'll move into the board discussion or board comments. Let's start with Sasha.
Everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So my comments, first, I just want to say thank you to everybody for participating in the meeting this evening. It's important. And thank you also to the people that put this ordinance together. It's a tough project to get started on. And I do think we need something, and I think that this is a good framework, but I do have some specific concerns, and they're pretty much have all been said. So I'm not going to go after them at length, but I would just like to say, what I will say is the section specifically that I think need a lot more discussion, just to sort of give what I feel is an idea of the amount of the ordinance that needs work. So first is section 2, subsection B, section 3, subsection G. That's the about the short-term rental, how they'll be chosen. That I think that we need to have a separate body, and that's been brought up. Section 6, subsection C, that's the 12 month requirement. Section 7, subsection B, the requiring of business licenses per unit. That was a little confusing to me. Section 8A, the having contact information on the outside of the rental property. To me, that is cumbersome and odd. I don't necessarily want my phone number on the outside of houses that I help take care of. If there's a complaint, then people can go to the board, and the board can, or committee can, then contact that person. I don't need my phone number out there. Some questions about section 9, subsection B and D. Was wondering about the interest and how it accrues. Section 10A, the maximum number of people that can be in there, that seems different to me, A and D. And then the one that's been brought up the most is section 12, that I agree that this is not emergent in that sense. So that's really all I have to say for my first 5 minutes until I hear more from other members of the board. Thank you.
Okay, just moving right across my board here, Kathy.
Can you guys hear me now? I'm finally unmuted.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yep.
Marty, I understand. So I have definitely want to do a little bit of talking here. I feel that I am a resident and elected representative of the residents and people of the town of Silver Plume. And I have been on this call and the previous one, and with this ordinance representing the town of Silver Plume, every section has been talked about to be rewritten with the exception of section 4 and 11. So I do agree with Rick that this needs to be completely rewritten. And with that, I agree with, I think 3 of our residents have now brought up that the board has other issues that need to be resolved for the safety and welfare and health of our town, and specifically our children. So I think we need to listen to them also as to what also needs to be addressed in the town. But as far as this ordinance goes, going along with Rick and saying that it needs to be completely re-evaluated, do we then need to reject this ordinance as written based on the public comment and start all over again with the committee and so on and so forth? Because like I said, every section has been talked about, revised, except for 4 and 11. So what is the procedural things here? Should I make a motion to reject this ordinance now, or how should we proceed?
I think you should give everybody on the board the chance to make their comments, and at the end of the comments and the rebuttal, we'll have a vote based on the 4 options that's been laid out in front of us.
Okay, so the thing that really hit me the strongest with this call is the financial burden that this would cause to some of our town people. And especially with the COVID thing going on, how poorly the timing was on this. And I really believe that the board did not do their due diligence in putting together this ordinance and considering the entire town at the time the ordinance was put together. So I think the board needs to do a better job on that. I also believe that at this point in time, we do not have a packet of information and applications to hand out in support of this sort of endeavor. And I think in the future, we need to make sure that we have all of our documentation ready to be reviewed by both the board and the public so that they can go through an application process that would be this cumbersome. And so, you know, I'm new on the board and have not seen previous packets. And so I don't know what we have to draw on for this, but this looks like there was a lot of new territory that needs to be talked about, how it's going to be implemented. And then of course, on the alternate of that, how it's going to be enforced. That's it.
Okay, Frank?
I've got 3 pages of yellow legal pad notes that I made during the meeting. I'm not going to go through them all at this point. I would just like to state that I do feel we need an ordinance such as this. At this point, there's been enough questions raised and things pointed out that I think we should continue to work on this ordinance. I think that would be the option 3, I think, that we started out with. And yes, we do need some more work sessions on this. I don't think we need a large citizen committee. The citizens have elected this board to administer functions of the town, but I see a need for more discussion involving some of the major participants who have experience with the short-term rentals. Again, that would be people who have been doing it, property owners that anticipate they will be doing it, and members of the town board. I think the key things are that one thing that Kathy just mentioned, that we need to have the actual application process and forms that have to be filled out are ready to go as soon as this ordinance gets, if it gets approved eventually. So I think to sum it up, we've had great comments, worked on this so far. I think it's needed. So I recommend that we have further work sessions to get this thing crafted so it fits our town. Thank you. Over.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Chris, you're next.
All right. Yeah, I'm here. So not to sound like a broken record or anything, but I do believe that this whole thing needs to be rewritten to an extent. Like Kathy said, every single section has been brought up and will be rewritten by somebody besides section 4 and section 11. I would like to see a subcommittee formed to make this process go by a little bit easier with part of the public and part of the board on it as well, so that we can maybe expedite a lot of these comments, expedite a lot of this stuff. So we're not all sitting on a Zoom call for 3 hours trying to dispute and debate back and forth of what we feel is fit for everything. But at this point, I would strongly feel that the board I would like to reject this as it is written and come back to it and get it done in a timely manner. I understand that some people find it emergent. I understand that some people don't. Myself, I don't find it super emergent, but I do find it something we need to get on and get handled as soon as possible. But I want to make sure that everybody in the public and everybody on the board, everybody in the whole town has a chance to put their input on it and do it correctly. So like I said, I don't want to sound like a broken record and spout off about all the bad things on it, but I would like to say that we would reject this copy and move forward with a complete rewrite. Thank you.
All right, Sarah?
Oh, good. Thanks, Tay. Thank you, Sam. And I too have been taking in this really helpful collection of comments and definitely taking to heart what we as a board need to assess and make a decision on in regards to this particular ordinance. I, agree with so many of the concerns, and I think we should be able to address a number of them. I don't think with the current draft, I don't think we need to scrap it. I think we need to listen carefully to the comments received on the appropriate sections. And I think about, the crafter and the amount of work that goes into it. I think the framework is there. And I believe that we can modify according to the good, rich contributions we've received on the earlier and this part of the hearing. So I'm fully supportive of the third option. I think we need such an ordinance. I am one of the people who feels strongly that even though our reality is that we don't have a rigorous regulation setup or legal setup as a small community, I think it's important for us to weave into the fabric of our community the desire to maintain a community sensibility, which in the longer term, I'd like to see tied into updating our long-term community plan, which is way out of date at this time. Master plan is what I mean in particular. But I don't think we should scrap it. I think we need it. I think I echo largely what Frank's comments were. I do, in contrast, think that some kind of a blended board community committee to help broaden our perspective on how the ordinance will ultimately be designed would be helpful and appropriate. I think we also might take this opportunity to look at our existing reality about how we are able to reach out to what parts of our community. How do we do that? We do that typically through a water sewer bill, which comes out every month. We now have an up-to-date website that maybe we can start driving people towards to be more actively engaged. I'm thinking about what Lauren said about, we do need volunteers. Are we reaching out to identify new folks to bring in fresh air, new blood to our various little committees? God, yes, we need to do that. But, we need an active email address, a set of emails that is readily activated and updated on a regular basis. I think the whole question of how do we reach out to those that ought to be engaged in this particular discussion, but others going forward, is something that as a board we can work on as well. So option 3 is my thing. I support.
1 minute, Sarah.
Sorry, what?
I was giving you your 1 minute warning.
Oh, thanks, Sasha. I believe I'm the only one who received a warning, Sasha. But anyway, so that's it. Option 3, I support forming a committee of some sort. I agree that it's not urgent, but it's important.
Okay, I'm gonna go a little out of turn here because I see somebody that got missed during the public comment that hasn't had the opportunity to speak that should. Tammy, it's your turn.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I kind of agree with Frank. I think having things in place and ready to go would be helpful too, and a little bit more time to do public outreach. So this idea of having a committee to work out the details and redo the ordinance, it would be, I think, the fair thing to do. And there is a lot of information that we may not have considered yet. So taking our time and getting some more input before we go ahead and pass it would, I think it would benefit everyone. I yield my time.
Okay. Have I missed anybody on the board except for Marty? There's a purpose for keeping Marty for last. Marty, it's your turn. You're up.
Okay. A lot of my issues have been addressed. I want to, first of all, thank everyone. It is so heartening to see the passion and concern of the citizens of this town. It's difficult to get a consensus of what the citizens require of us. I'd like to reaffirm what Kathy said, that we are elected to represent the majority of the citizens. Hopefully the word majority is the operant thing. There are going to be people who are not satisfied with what comes out of this. But if the majority of the citizens come up with something that they request of us, that they desire of us, that is what we should be following, whether as individual citizens we agree with it or not. We represent you. We require input. And I want to thank everyone who is participating in this endeavor. So thank you. A couple of things of history. Frank informed me back in the 90s when myself, Sarah, and Frank were on the board, we do have a court in place, so enforcement, it needs to be worked on. We need to establish how it will be utilized, but that mechanism is in place, so we're not starting from scratch. Also, this is definitely not an emergent, but on the last board, we had the sheriff, we had emergency services, and we had public service, which is now Excel, with 3 different sets of addresses. It took us 7 damn years to come up with a consistent numbering system. We cannot allow that to drag on to that extent. As to specifics, I think one of the concerns is property rights are a priority in my mind. They need to be respected. We have come to agree that previous operation of short-term rentals is not going to be part of this ordinance. I totally agree with that. Lauren, we are not looking to overly burden people. $250 a year compared to other entities, which we are not, thankfully, any other community, is not an excessive burden. It's $20 a month. I think a license fee is appropriate, and $250 is not pejorative. I think the reason for this has been stated already, but we are not looking to impose restrictions on conscientious, community-oriented citizens to live their lives in ways that are not of their choosing. We do want to make sure that our lack of any governing standards is not exploited by those who are just purely self-interested and look at this an opportunity to turn this into something that I think everyone who has chosen to live here, and I've lived here for 42 years, because of the freedoms, because of the sense of community. But there are entities who will try and exploit that. That happened back again in the 90s. We did not have a uniform building code adopted, and someone took advantage of that to put up a structure that was unsafe, inappropriate, and in many ways needed to be rejected. So that's what we are looking to do with this ordinance. I agree we need to redo this, and we need to do it in a way that gives the citizens of the town the most, give the citizens of towns the ones who have the most decision-making powers. Again, we have been elected to represent the citizens, the majority of the citizens. And please, I ask that if what comes out of all of this is something that as individuals someone doesn't like, myself included, we agree that the majority of the citizens have come up with a solution, and that is what we will follow in drafting a new ordinance and in trying to find a way of enforcing it.
30 seconds, Marty.
Okay, I'll wait for my next 5 minutes. I don't have much more surprising, and that was why, because thank you. I'm glad, Sarah, that I have also been warned. I don't want you to feel acted upon as an individual in a pejorative way.
All right, thank you, Marty. Here in just a minute, we'll give everybody on the board a chance one more time to say whatever they want to say. I'd like to say, first of all, I want to answer a couple of questions that have come up throughout the meeting that I didn't address during my last chance to talk. There was a question in one of the written comments about the insurance and that's none of the government's business. And I tend to agree that the government shouldn't be as involved in things as they are, but there's not very many businesses around that can operate without insurance. The government controls insurance in just about every type of business there is. The government requires you to have business or have insurance, and I believe it's the town's duty to make sure that these businesses are being run with the proper type of insurance. Just a homeowner's policy doesn't cover the liability of this type of business. So that's the reason for the insurance clause in the draft of the ordinance. There's been several people ask what the license fee is going to be used for. The license fee is to cover the administrative cost of implementing the ordinance and maintaining it. I think that's all I had in mind this time. So let's start over with the public comment or with the board comment. Well, before we do that, Joe, do you have anything else you'd like to say at this point? Joe, are you there? Okay. Rick, do you have anything to add right now?
I'm sorry, Sam. What was the question?
Just do you have anything to add right now? We're going to go through the board one more time for a rebuttal, but I wanted to give you the opportunity if you had anything to interject at this point.
Well, I think at the end of the comments, if all of you have some more questions and further discussion, then at that point, it might be appropriate to talk about, what the next step is. I'm hearing some comments that lead me to think that you might be looking more closely at option 3 versus option 4 of rejecting the ordinance and starting all over again. So I think at this point, it makes sense just to make sure everyone has weighed in before getting to that point.
Okay. Rick, do you have anything to add at this point?
I think he did an over and out.
He's muted.
Okay.
No.
All right. Okay, let's start with Sasha this time.
All right. Again, I'm just echoing that I think that it's a good framework and that it needs a lot of work. So I am leaning towards option 3 of trying to use this as our form to move forward, but working out a lot of the bugs. As everybody has kind of pointed out, that there were issues with multiple sections of it, and a lot of clarification that needs to happen for both the board and the community and the businesses that it will impact. So that's my final 2 cents, is that I am leaning towards option 3.
Okay. I'm just going across my screen here, and it keeps shifting around. So Sarah, you'll be next. Sarah, you're up. You're still muted.
Oh, good.
There you go.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I have nothing further to say. I kind of echo what Sash just said. And again, echo the appreciations that were extended before to both our active and concerned public and our board members and Rick and others who really put time into putting the initial draft together. That's it for me. Over and out.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah, at this point, I'm definitely in favor of option 3 and don't want to be echoing everybody else. So that's all I've got to say, and thank you.
Okay, Kathy.
Yes, hi. Will option 3 go all the way back then to the first reading? Because I think it's important that we also have the first reading on this again.
Mm-hmm.
Will that do that? Will option 3 do that?
I guess it can, if that's what we decide to do.
Because I think this is going to be revised enough that even though it might retain the ordinance number, it's not going to look too much like the ordinance we have in place. We have with this ordinance, the proposed ordinance. So I think we need to go all the way back to the first reading, and all the approvals. And then with that one include the informational packet that's been talked about, the details.
Is that all?
Well, that's, I guess I kind of would like, either Joe or somebody to respond to that. Can we, with option 3, can we go all the way back to the first reading, redo the town hearings, the entire thing when we get to that point?
Well, I think if you essentially want to start over, again, kind of with the framework of the first ordinance in terms of recognizing and acknowledging that you do want to have an ordinance in place. But by the same token, you want to start over and create what I would call a task force for a specific purpose. Then it, to me, falls more under option 4 of rejecting this ordinance and then starting all over. Because with option 3, remember, it's a matter of directing Rick to prepare a revised draft ordinance incorporating comments, that have been made tonight, and then scheduling, a review of that revised draft at a date certain. And with the discussion about a possible task force, again, I'm not sure that would fall under option 3, if that makes sense.
I agree with that. I would like to use this ordinance as written as the starting place, but I would like to still have the first reading and the town included on the rewrite, just like Joe just said.
And as part of that, Kathy, are you thinking, and I'm throwing this out to everyone, of course, too, having a task force, some involvement from the community, as some of you have discussed, or, a mix of community members and board members. And I know there's some disagreement as to how that might look, but that's something, I guess, moving forward, you'd need to decide what you want to do.
Yes, I think that's a really good idea because, like, Ebb has suggested that he could help people understand the insurance part of it and has volunteered to help with that. And so having the people who are already doing short-term rentals help with designing this, I think we'll get the best hybrid of legal, board, and those people that have the knowledge of already doing the short-term rentals. So I think, a task force would be, or a committee, however you want to word it, would be an extremely valuable resource. That's all I have. I feel like Janis Joplin. That's all, folks.
Okay, Frank, you're up.
This is Frank. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
You bet.
Okay. I'm unable to start a video at this point. Someone's cutting me off. But anyway, I think I'm going to be short here. I think as I said before, the option 3 is the way to go. I am not in agreement on throwing this out and signing over. We have done a lot of good work. We've got a lot of comments on the official public record. If we restarted the process again, we'll just have to go through the same thing. I would recommend that we, again, stick with option 3. We form a committee to assist Rick and whoever else wants to rewrite what we already have in lieu of the comments. And I don't recommend going back to square one and starting over again. Over.
Okay, I think Marty's the only one left. Go ahead, Marty.
Okay, I agree with Kathy. I think we do need to go back and have another reading of the revised or new ordinance. I would like to encourage individual citizens, if the other board members are willing, to contact us as individuals and discuss their concerns with us. I've spoken to Eben today and Christine yesterday, and gotten a sense of their concerns, and I think that would be really helpful in drafting an ordinance that takes into account stakeholders, as both of them are, as well as citizens who are not stakeholders. I think the task force, if you will, should be made up of citizens and board members, and I would certainly like to be on that. I think the one problem with 3 is Joe pointed out that it mandates that it doesn't accommodate the concept of a task force made up of citizens and board members, as well as Rick's invaluable input to address this issue. Other needs have been brought up. I think once again, please contact me and ask me what is being done to address those issues. Kathy, we went together to look at the replacement dumpster, which would deal with one of those issues. Sam and I are planning on meeting with the transfer station this week to deal with the bear problem. There are things that are being done, but we need to amp up our communication with the citizens. Again, I would like to just thank everyone. This is one of the very first times that I've seen such a passionate, concerned participation from the citizens in a collective way, and that is so invaluable to help us to represent the citizens, which is what we've been elected to do. And I know I'm repeating myself, but I cannot stress that enough. So thank you so much for participating. Whether we agree or disagree, this is the way that this town should work, and without getting overly, but this country should work. We represent everyone here, as well as myself and the other board members who are stakeholders. So thank you very, very much again, and please feel free to get a hold of me about specific concerns. And that's about it. I made it in less than 5 minutes. That's unusual. And thank everyone for being courteous to one another and not degenerating into what we had at the last meeting, where everyone was, blap, 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 blap at each other. Thank you again for the respect that we've shown each other. That's as nice as I'm ever going to fucking be.
All right, now I'd like to ask Joe to clarify a few things before we move on to a vote here. The difference between option 3 and option 4. There's nothing in option 3 that would prevent us from having a committee to help us make the changes that need to be changed, is there?
There isn't, but part of option 3 is that Rick would be directed to revise the draft ordinance, and that there be a date certain then that's established to review the revised draft. So I think you'd have to take into account what that process would be. How long would it take? I mean, would it take, I don't know what your thoughts are, 60 days, 90 days, something like that, less? But there would need to be a date certain then to review the revised draft.
So that's basically the difference. Is if we go with option number 3, then we set a date and it's got to be finished by then. If we go with number 4, then there's no date set. It just, we start over completely from scratch, throw this one out the window and start over. And when they get something put together, then we bring it before the board again.
Right. You start all over.
Okay.
So there may be time considerations there that, that factor into that decision. How long do you anticipate that this will take to get a task force together? How long from there would it take Rick to draft a revised ordinance? And just having that in mind so that, you can make an informed decision. Does it make sense to actually have that date certain and that framework in place? Or is this going to require such an overhaul and such an extensive period of time for the task force to be formed and weigh in and then make some recommendations to the board, if that answers your question. So I think timing is a big consideration, is the bottom line, as to which option you might want to pursue.
Okay. This wasn't part of the original agenda, but I think we have a little more to discuss here. It's become pretty obvious to me that it's going to be a choice between 3 or 4. So I want to go through the board one more time to discuss those options. Is that okay with everybody?
Fine with me.
Okay.
Yes.
Sarah?
Sam, excuse me. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you want this to have a time limit on it as well?
I believe so. I don't want to end up here till morning. Sarah, why don't you go first this time?
Yeah, quickly. I would be okay with 4 if we could be assured that we are actually going to do an ordinance to address the shared concerns that we've all heard. My concern with number 4 is that I thought it also allowed for us just to say, heck, we don't need an ordinance. So if
It does have that option.
So that's my challenge with 4, and why I lean towards 3, and adapting 3 so that we do as much of what 4 would offer as possible. If I can be assured as a board member that number 4 does not say, we're just going to blow it off and not do anything about the concerns that our community is facing, actively facing, understanding all of the concerns about economic challenges, et cetera, and all of the positive things that could come of enhancing the short-term rental market. I don't want to give up on this. So that's my hesitance about 4. And if I can be convinced that 4 is gonna mean forward motion and not scrapping all the work that we've done on this, then I would support 4. Over.
Okay, Sasha?
I guess mine are more questions directed at to Joe. So if it makes more sense for them to be answered at the end, let me know. I agree with Sarah, and then there have been a couple comments coming from people as well. That is it possible to make the motion for number 4 and set it, and in the motion say that we will still be making an ordinance and set a date to begin revisions, or does that fall under 3? And also the time limit. Ordinances die after a certain amount of time. And I guess I agree with Sarah. That's what gives me pause for 4.
Okay, Frank?
I think that we should stay with option 3, probably set a 6-month date certain at the end of 6 months that we will have, or before that we should have a next work session on the current odds. I'm not in favor of scrapping what we've done and starting over. So that's my feeling. I think through everything we need to work through, and yeah, over.
Okay, Chris?
I'm in favor of option 4 because it gives us a little bit more wiggle room, but I don't like that the ordinance can die. I am afraid of that as well. I would like to get this going in a timely manner, but I want to make sure that we get every bit of input we can out of every public view, out of every view possible at this point. So I would kind of agree with Sasha if we can set somewhat of a time limit to begin revisions and something else in the motion like that. I would like to see 4 more than 3, because I think that we can still use the framework from this ordinance, make it our own. But I do believe that we're going to need some time to do so. And I would like to do the what is the word I'm looking for? The routine again, I guess. I'd like to do a first reading, a public hearing, everything else again. So that's all I got.
Kathy?
I agree with option 4 and what Chris and the others have said about setting some time to get this thing going. I also have been reading some of the chat things that have been going on, and the town is very concerned about getting their input on it. And I think option 4 gives us the best hybrid of all the situations and getting all of the residents' input on this ordinance as it goes along. And I think as far as the committee goes, to make sure that this keeps going, the ordinance doesn't die, that, you know, as many board members who want to be on the committee should be allowed to be on the committee. That's all.
All right, Marty?
Okay, I agree with 4, but utilizing 3 or utilizing the current ordinance as a resource framework, however you perceive it. We can scrap it in theory, but I think we have a framework that we can utilize in drafting a new ordinance. I agree with Kathy in that I think board members who are willing to put in the time and effort to address this significant matter should be allowed to participate. I think we should, as a courtesy, not direct Rick, but ask him if he would be willing to lend his invaluable expertise to this effort, and that's, I think, an issue of respect. And I would like to suggest either Halloween or the day after Election Day as the deadline, the national election day, if we're allowed to have an election, as the end, as the deadline to produce a product. And I think that's just about it. Or I know that's just about it.
Okay.
Has everyone weighed in? I just wanted to comment on Marty's last comment, and that's a good point, Marty, as far as directing Rick. First of all, I think the town would need to make sure that Rick is still willing and interested in continuing in the role that he has and has done a great job, I think. Rick, are you still on? Oh, okay, there you are. And then also, I think it would be really important if there is a task force that's formed, that if Rick is willing, that he's part of it because he's been so involved in the process up to this point. That's my thought on that.
Go ahead, Rick.
I've been trying to intervene for some time, but I can't seem to get chat to work. And my video has disappeared, so I couldn't wave or raise my hand or anything. I'm okay with option 4. I I don't think there's a major difference between the two, except that with 3, we got to set a time certain. And we might not set enough time to get it done right. We might set twice as much time as we need to get it done right. So I favor 4. You know, look, even under 3, there's no guarantee that we're going to work out something we like. So let's go 4. Let's start over. We can still use an awful lot of the drafting that's been done, and I would expect to. And yes, I am willing to continue. And yes, I would like to be on the task force. And with respect to the task force, I'd like to suggest that we try to keep the numbers fairly small, because it's going to be difficult to work with a group this size at all. I mean, it just has to be a much smaller group if we're going to make any progress. And I would also ask that people on the group not think in terms of doing the redrafting, but figuring out what it is we want to say in a variety of circumstances, what we want the outcome to be. I can draft that then, as long as I know what it is we want to say. So I guess that covers me. Thanks. Over and out.
All right. I think the only one that hasn't spoke on this so far is me. And I think number 3 is the better option. I think we ought to set a date of 60 or 90 days out. I think we ought to put together a task force or a committee or whatever you want to call it, with 2 or 3 board members, 2 or 3 members of people that are doing this now that have some experience in it, and 2 or 3 members of the community who do not do this. Everybody in this town, every individual in this town has a stake in this, whether they're renting a short-term rental or not. I believe we ought to include everybody's input. I agree 100% with the comments that have said that we as a board represent the town and the people in this town. And I don't think that we should throw out what we have already. I think there's a good base there that may need some modification. But I don't think we ought to throw it out and start from scratch.
Didn't say that.
We're not going to do that.
I agree with Rick that it should be a smaller group. I don't think that we should have every board member on it. I don't think that we should have everybody in town that's renting a short-term rental on it. And I do think that we need some members of the community that are not interested in renting short-term rentals, because they have a stake in it too. I think there ought to be a limit on it of no more than 10 people total. That's my opinion. I think it's time to, unless there's somebody else, Joe, Rick, do you have any more to say before we move on to a vote?
No, I think though that whichever route you go, we should put that committee together now, and we should set up a timetable for when it will meet. And I assume for the indefinite future, it will have to be via Zoom again. But if we don't do it now, then when will we do it?
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Go ahead.
So with doing if we go with option 4 in making the motion, can we say at such and such date we would come together to form the committee and all that? Can that be part of the motion or not?
I don't know. I think whatever option we go with, as Tay pointed out, setting up a committee and that wasn't on the agenda for tonight. So I think that's something that will have to be added to the agenda for next Monday night for the regular board meeting. And that would give us some time to find some other members of the community that might be interested in being on the committee anyway. And at that point, we would set up a committee. We would set up a time for the first meeting and go from there.
That makes sense to me.
I have a
Go ahead,
question,
Marty.
Sam. Can we implement I know legally we cannot do a motion that would include the committee since it was not on the agenda, but is there any way for us to set a deadline of next Friday to have citizens and board members who are interested in serving on this committee submit their desire to do so, and that at the next meeting, when it will be on the agenda, we can move forward in selecting that committee, setting up when the committee, how often, etc., all of those procedures, and a rough final date for submission of a revised or new ordinance. Is that a possibility? Because I would like to, as everyone has said, move forward on as efficaciously as possible. And if it's going to be on the agenda for the next meeting, I would like to have the ability to make a decision on how and what form it would take to proceed.
Sarah? You're still muted.
Thanks. So Sam, I think trying to make a decision at the next meeting about the composition of the committee sounds a little aggressive and wouldn't allow enough time for us to consult with folks and make a plan, essentially. And I also think that we should identify a person on the board or a couple folks on the board to put together a plan, a milestone timeline kind of outline for how to proceed with this that takes into consideration all of the good input that we've received on, tonight and the night before the other meeting. I think we're pushing too hard to try to identify and figure it out by the next meeting. It's just based on this input. I do think we need to be careful and we need to plan. And I don't think we're going to have a complete ready plan in 2 weeks. We could try, but I don't think we have to determine who's going to do it. And that's going to be a shitload of work outreach wise to put together a viable plan in 2 weeks. I'm just talking, if it were me, I live in Plume, I do have a job, but it's going to take time for somebody to do that. So.
Well, as far as I see it, the decision before us tonight is whether we're going to work on the one we already have or throw it out the window. Any other decision after that is to be made at a future board meeting.
Okay, good. Good. But not next board meeting.
Well, we don't have to make decisions about who's going to be on it at the next board meeting. It probably ought to be discussed at the next board meeting what the framework's going to be and the number. We ought to start on it, but.
I think it can be addressed initially at the next board meeting. I don't think that there's a problem with that, addressing it, just what needs to happen moving forward. Probably you're not going to be at a point to make decisions at the next board meeting, but I think getting the ball rolling and putting it on the agenda and starting to discuss it makes sense.
Yeah.
And from there, you talk about what that framework looks like.
Yeah, I was just responding, Joe, to the aggressive outline of one of the previous speakers was making. I I agree with that.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to a vote now. We outlined at the beginning of this meeting 4 options. I'll mention those options one at a time and ask for votes. If you vote on one, don't vote on another. The first option being to accept it as written. What? Okay, when you vote, we'll vote one at a time. How about if I just go through the board and ask each one what number, 1, 2, 3, or 4? Does that sound agreeable?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Chris
Sasha.
is muted.
Sasha, 1, 2, 3, or 4?
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out why people are muted. Just 1 second.
If they're muted right now, they've muted themselves as far as board members.
No, Chris is shaking his head. No, Chris is still muted.
I'm
There he
good,
goes.
thank you.
Okay. I am going option 4.
Okay. Frank, 1, 2, 3, or 4?
I'll go option 4.
Okay. Sarah? 4. Chris?
Option 4.
Kathy?
Option 4.
All right. Marty?
4.
All right. Motion carries unanimously.
No, nobody made a motion.
Okay. We're going with number 4 unanimously.
We still have to make a motion, don't we?
I move to go with option 4 unanimously.
Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't need a motion when it was laid out at the beginning of the meeting what the options would be. Is that correct?
Let's just
Well,
do it.
Yeah, I think a motion makes sense.
Okay.
For consensus, yeah.
All right, we have a motion to go with option 4. Is there a second?
Yes, I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That was very enthusiastic, Frank.
All right, we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss how or if we're going to proceed from here. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank
Thanks,
everyone.
Joe.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
It's very
Walden.
heartening to see. Thank you.
Can somebody who knows more about Zoom than me instruct me how to use chat?
Rick, can you repeat that?
How to
Can
use
some-
chat.
Yeah, I tried to use chat quite a long time ago, and I got my message typed, but I couldn't manage to get it into the queue.
Oh, did you hit? I can come over and show you this week if you want. It's Tay.
All right.
Sorry.
Well,
This
that'd
is
be good.
okay.
That'd be good.
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Tay.
I probably need to be in a meeting to do it, don't I?
We'll set it up so I can show you how to do it.
All right, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Joe.
Night.
Thank
Gosh.
you, Tay.